The crash came from Maya's bedroom at 7:42 on a Monday morning. 1 second, I was standing in our kitchen, trying to decide whether yesterday's coffee could be reheated without becoming a health code violation. The next, I heard would hit the floor, glass rattle, and Maya shout my name. Ethan! I ran down the hall and pushed open her door. For half a second, I saw enough to understand that she had been changing clothes. Then I turned so fast my shoulder struck the doorframe. Sorry, I said, staring at the hallway wall. I heard something fall. Are you hurt? Only my dignity. I'm closing the door. Good plan. I stepped into the hall, pulled the door shut behind me, and tried to forget that my pulse had suddenly forgotten its normal rhythm. A minute later, the door opened again. Maya stood there wearing a robe, one hand resting on the frame. Her dark hair fell loosely around her shoulders, and the embarrassment in her face had already been replaced by an expression I knew too well. She was about to make my life difficult. You saw something you weren't supposed to see, she said softly. I know.
I'm sorry.
She leaned closer and whispered, now take responsibility. Before we go on, please subscribe, and tell me in the comments what you would have done in my place.
Isterte her.
Responsibility. That's usually what the word means. I understand the word. I'm questioning the sentence. Behind her, a wooden clothing rack lay across the carpet. Several empty hangers were scattered beside it, and one framed photograph leaned dangerously against the leg of her desk. I didn't come in on purpose, I said. You shouted my name. The rack collapsed, and I thought it collapsed on you. It almost collapsed on my camera case. That would have been tragic. It cost more than your car. My car is 15 years old. Exactly. She crossed her arms. The robe was tied securely, but I kept my eyes firmly on her face anyway. We've lived together for 14 months, she said. You've repaired my desk, driven me to urgent care, brought me soup when I had the flu, and argued with a delivery company for 40 minutes because they left my lenses in the rain. They deserved it. But you've never taken me on a date. I stopped breathing for a moment. Maya's expression didn't change. That, I said carefully, is what you mean by responsibility? One real date. Maya. No roommate dinner. No ordering 2 entrees and dividing the bill because it's efficient. No talking about rent, groceries, or whether the dishwasher makes that noise because it's dying. It is dying. Not relevant. I glanced toward the kitchen, as if the refrigerator might offer legal counsel. Maya stepped into the hallway. You can say no, she said. The teasing had disappeared from her voice. That was what made the question dangerous. We had become roommates because my coworker's cousin knew a photographer who needed a second bedroom in Seattle. At the time, it had sounded temporary and practical. She needed a place near downtown. I needed someone reliable to split the rent on an apartment in Queen Anne. 14 months later, she knew how I took my coffee. I knew which songs she played when she was worried. She left notes on my lunch containers. I adjusted the hallway lights because she said the old bulbs made the apartment feel like a hospital. We had built a life made of small things and had never once discussed what those things meant. When? I asked. Her eyebrows lifted. When would this date happen? Wednesday. You already picked a day? I'm a planner. You once bought a plane ticket 11 hours before departure. That was planned spontaneity. I should have laughed and escaped into the kitchen. Instead, I looked at her and realized she was waiting for a real answer. Wednesday, I said. Dinner. A real date. She smiled, and the hallway suddenly felt smaller. Good. Do I get any guidelines? Yes. Wear the blue shirt. You hate that shirt.
Ido.
Wear the charcoal one. Anything else? Don't act like you're doing community service. Then she walked back into her room and closed the door. I stood in the hallway for several seconds before returning to the kitchen, where the coffee had become the least complicated thing in my morning. Maya left 20 minutes later wearing black pants, a cream sweater, and the determined expression she used whenever she was pretending not to be nervous. She was preparing for her first solo photography exhibition. The opening was scheduled for Saturday night at a small gallery in Pioneer Square. For 6 months, our dining table had been covered with contact sheets, sample prints, handwritten notes, and tiny sketches of how she wanted each wall arranged. The exhibition was called Almost Home. I had asked her what the title meant. She had said, "It means you can recognize home before you're brave enough to admit you want it." At the time, I had assumed she was talking about the photographs. After she left, I carried the broken rack into the living room and repaired it with 2 brackets from my toolbox. I told myself I did it because it would only take 10 minutes. I didn't ask myself why I had already started thinking about Wednesday. The next afternoon, Maya called while I was reviewing plans for a hotel renovation. "Are you busy?" she asked. "Yes." "How busy?" "Enough that I'm afraid to answer that question." "I need help." I leaned back in my chair. "With what?" The installer who was supposed to help me at the gallery had a family emergency. Lena can manage the guest list and catering, but neither of us knows how to mount the larger frames safely. "You hired an installer." "I hired an installer who is currently driving to Spokane because his father is in the hospital." "Is his father okay?" "He thinks so, but he won't be back this week." I looked across the conference room. My colleagues were arguing over stone samples and pretending they weren't all identical. "What time are you going to the gallery?" 4. "I can be there at 5:30. "You don't have to. You called me." "I called because you know how buildings work." "That is a very generous description of my profession. You also own a level." "Now I feel valued." She was quiet for a second. "This isn't part of the date," she said. "I know. And it isn't part of taking responsibility." "I know that too. I don't want you helping because you feel guilty about yesterday." "Maya." "What?" "I'm helping because your work deserves to be displayed correctly." There was another pause. Then she said, 5:30. The gallery occupied the ground floor of an old brick building with narrow windows and uneven floors. When I arrived, Maya was standing on a ladder, holding a framed photograph against the wall, while Lena Park tried to measure the distance from the ceiling. Lena noticed me first. "Excellent," she said. "An adult with tools. I'm going to assume you mean me." Maya brought a hammer and emotional confidence. "The hammer is useful," Maya said. "It has a floral handle. It still hits things." I set my toolbox beside the wall and studied the room. The gallery was long and narrow, with track lighting overhead and exposed brick along the back. Maya had arranged the photographs in groups that moved from crowded city scenes toward quieter domestic images. I understood the story immediately. "You want the room to feel like it's exhaling," I said. Maya looked down from the ladder. "What?" "The first wall is noisy. Lots of movement, lots of people. Then the images get quieter as you go deeper." She climbed down slowly. "Yes. The lighting should do the same thing." Lena pointed at me. "This is why we summoned him." "I wasn't summoned," I said. "You appeared after one phone call. That qualifies." I unfolded the gallery plan and sketched 3 lighting options. The first was dramatic but would create glare on the glass. The second was safer but too flat. The third used narrower angles and left the final image slightly isolated. Maya studied all 3. "Which one would you choose?" she asked. "The third." "Why?" "Because the room should slow people down before they reach the last photograph." Her eyes moved from the plan to me. "That's what I wanted." "Then choose the third." She did. We worked for almost 3 hours. I installed mounting rails while Maya adjusted spacing and Lena labeled each piece. Maya and I moved around each other with the ease of people who had shared a kitchen for more than a year. She handed me the right tool before I asked. I caught the corner of a frame before it struck the floor. When she stepped backward without looking, my hand closed around her elbow and steadied her. For 1 second, neither of us moved. Then she looked at my hand. I let go. "Occupational hazard," I said. "Roommate hazard." "Formerly." Her mouth curved slightly. "Wednesday hasn't happened yet." At the far end of the gallery, one large frame remained covered with a gray cloth. A small label rested beneath it. "Almost home." I nodded toward it. The title piece? Yes. Can I see it? Not yet. You've shown me every other photograph. That one goes up Thursday. Why Thursday? Because I said so. Lena passed us carrying a box of labels. She's been guarding that picture like it contains classified information. Maya gave her a warning look. Lena raised both hands. I know nothing. I say nothing. I returned to the lighting plan, but the covered photograph stayed in the corner of my vision. When we finished, Maya walked me to the door. Thank you, she said. You don't have to thank me. I do when someone gives up an evening to help me. I had no plans. That isn't the same as owing me your time. The sentence was simple, but it landed harder than it should have. I wanted to be here, I said. She looked at me for a moment, as if deciding whether to believe more than the words. Then she smiled. Tomorrow at 7. For the date.
No, isen.
For our quarterly roommate budget review. I opened the door. Charcoal shirt. Definitely. I spent far too long choosing a restaurant. Seattle had hundreds of places appropriate for a date, but every option seemed wrong for a different reason. Too formal made it look as if I were overcompensating. Too casual made it look as if I didn't take her seriously. Too familiar would turn it into one of our ordinary dinners. Eventually, I reserved a table at a small restaurant overlooking Elliott Bay. It was warm without being expensive, quiet without feeling solemn, and far enough from our usual neighborhood that we couldn't accidentally pretend the evening was normal. Maya came out of her room at 6:45 wearing a blue dress. I had seen the dress once before, months earlier, when she tried it on before a client event. I had told her the color made her look happy. I had forgotten saying it. Apparently, she hadn't. You're early, she said. I live here. That has never made you early for anything. I looked at the dress again. You look. She waited, cleared my throat. Happy. Something softened in her expression. That was the goal. The drive downtown was awkward for exactly 6 minutes. Then Maya reached for the radio, found an old song we both knew, and accused me of singing the wrong lyrics. I am not singing the wrong lyrics. You replaced an entire line with sounds. I was preserving the melody. You were panicking. I'm driving. That is unrelated. By the time we reached the restaurant, the tension had changed. It was still there, but now it felt less like a warning and more like a current running beneath every ordinary sentence. The host led us to a table near the window. Ferries moved across the dark water, their lights reflecting in broken lines. We sat down. Maya glanced at the menus. So, she said, what do people discuss on real dates? I've heard rumors about childhood, dreams, and severe food allergies. You know my childhood. I know you grew up outside Eugene, hated piano lessons, and once broke your wrist falling from a tree. I jumped from the tree. That makes the story worse. It was a strategic jump. Toward the ground. She laughed. It was the first time that evening I stopped thinking about whether I was doing the date correctly. We talked about her exhibition. I asked when she had first wanted to become a photographer. She told me about her mother's old camera and the summer she spent taking pictures of empty barns because she was too shy to photograph people. Then she asked about the house I had once designed for myself. I put down my fork. I had never told her much about it. 5 years earlier, I had been engaged. My fiancé and I had bought a small piece of land outside the city. I designed a house around everything she said she wanted. Large kitchen, music room, garden windows, a reading nook facing west. 2 months before the wedding, she left. Not for someone else. Not because of a dramatic betrayal. She simply realized she did not want the life we had planned. I sold the land and never finished the drawings. I don't think she was wrong, I told Maya. That was the difficult part. She had the right to change her mind. But I had built so much of my future around her that when she left, I didn't know which parts of the future were still mine. Maya's voice grew quieter. So now you don't build around people. I build hotels. That wasn't what I meant. I looked out at the water.
I'm careful.
Careful can protect people. It can. It can also keep them outside. I met her eyes. There was no accusation in her expression, only recognition. I changed the subject before I could decide whether that made the moment safer or more dangerous. What scares you about Saturday? Her fingers tightened around the stem of her glass. That no one will understand the exhibition. I understood it. You understand me. The words stayed between us. Maya looked down. I almost canceled the show, she said. 3 weeks ago. Why? Because wanting something publicly means failing publicly is possible. That's true. Very comforting. I'm not finished. She looked up. I think you've spent years noticing things other people miss, I said. If the room is empty Saturday, the work is still good. If it's full, the work is still yours. The audience doesn't decide whether you were brave enough to make it. Her eyes shone in the candlelight. You really believe that? Yes. She smiled, but it wasn't her teasing smile. It was smaller and more vulnerable. I wore this dress because you once said the color made me look happy. The confession caught me off guard. I remember the dress. You didn't remember the comment.
No.
I did. Her phone lit up beside her plate. The message preview showed a name, Olivia Grant. Below it, I caught only 2 words before Maya turned the screen face down. Portland assignment. I didn't ask. She didn't explain. After dinner, we walked along the waterfront. The air smelled like salt and rain. At one point, Maya's hand brushed mine. Neither of us moved away. Then she hooked her little finger around mine. It was barely contact. It felt more intimate than a kiss would have. When we reached the apartment, we stood outside our separate bedroom doors. I had a good time, she said. So did I. That sounded surprised. I'm surprised by how nervous I was. You hide it well. I reorganized the silverware before we left. I noticed. I smiled. She looked at me for a long moment. Good night, Ethan. Good night. She went into her room. I stayed in the hallway, aware that the date had solved nothing. It had only made everything more real. Thursday morning, I arrived at the gallery before Maya. She found me standing in front of the uncovered title photograph. Almost Home showed 2 coffee mugs on our kitchen table at sunrise. One was mine, a chipped black mug I had owned since college. The other was hers, white with a narrow gold line near the rim. Soft morning light crossed the table, touching the edge of an open notebook and the leaves of the basil plant Maya kept forgetting to water. No people appeared in the frame, but I knew exactly who had been there. You took this in our apartment, I said. Maya placed her bag on the floor. Yes. When? Last fall. I studied the photograph again. The image was quiet, almost ordinary. That was what made it powerful. It looked like a moment no one had staged. A life continuing without realizing it was being witnessed. Why is it called Almost Home? She joined me in front of the frame. Because that was the first morning the apartment stopped feeling temporary. Something tightened in my chest. You'd already lived there for months. I know. What changed? She looked at the photograph instead of me. You made coffee before I had an early shoot. You left it on the table with a note telling me not to forget my extra battery. It wasn't a big thing. I remember. No, you don't. I remember the battery. That proves my point. What point? You do things that matter and then act as if they don't. Before I could answer, her phone rang. She glanced at the screen. Olivia. The Portland assignment? Maya went still. I saw the message preview last night, I said. I wasn't trying to read it. I know. She answered the call and stepped toward the front of the gallery. I moved to the lighting controls, giving her privacy. Her conversation was short and professional. Yes, I received the proposal. A pause. Sunday works. Another pause. 6 months is what we discussed. She thanked Olivia and ended the call. I waited until she returned. You applied for a job in Portland? A project, not a permanent job. For 6 months. Yes. When did you apply? 5 weeks ago. The answer surprised me more than the offer. You never mentioned it. I didn't know if I would get it. That usually doesn't stop you from mentioning things. This felt different. Because you might have to leave? Because I didn't know what leaving would mean. Her voice was calm, but the space between us had changed. Do you want it? I asked. Yes. The certainty in her answer came quickly. Then she added, I think I do. I nodded. What kind of work? Olivia is producing a visual series on independent businesses across Oregon. I travel, shoot portraits, document spaces, and help build the final book. That sounds made for you. It does. When would you start? 2 weeks. I looked again at Almost Home. And you have to decide by Sunday. Yes. The movers had not been mentioned. The apartment had not been mentioned. We had not been mentioned. I told myself that was because nothing had been decided. Maya watched me carefully. Say something. You should be proud. That isn't what I asked. I'm trying to understand. So am I. We returned to work, but the gallery no longer felt like a shared project. Every measurement, every photograph, every lighting adjustment now seemed connected to a deadline I had not known existed. I wanted to ask whether our date had affected her decision. I wanted to ask whether the photograph meant what I hoped it meant. Instead, I adjusted a light by 3 degrees and told myself there would be a better time. Friday morning, I made coffee before Maya woke. 2 mugs sat on the table in the same positions as the photograph. When she entered the kitchen, she stopped. Subtle, she said. I didn't arrange them that way intentionally. You're an architect. You arranged chairs intentionally. I pushed her mug toward her. Have you decided about Portland? She sat across from me.
No.
What's stopping you? Maya wrapped both hands around the coffee. You. The word was quiet. My first instinct was hope. My second was fear. I imagined asking her to stay. I imagined her refusing. Worse, I imagined her agreeing and regretting it 3 months later. I thought about the house I had designed for someone else. I thought about how easily love could turn into a structure one person felt trapped inside. You should take it, I said. Maya's face became unreadable. That was quick. Opportunities like this don't wait. I know. You've worked for years for something like this. I know that too. Then you shouldn't let the apartment or the exhibition or anything else hold you back. Anything else. I heard the change in her voice, but I kept going. The project is only 6 months. Seattle will still be here. And what about Wednesday? I looked at her. The date.
No. Isen.
The weather. I deserved the sarcasm. The date mattered to me. But I don't want it to make this decision harder for you. She set down her mug. You keep saying what you don't want. Maya, you don't want to pressure me. You don't want to complicate things. You don't want to make the decision harder. I'm trying to support you. Then tell me what you do want. The answer existed inside me, but it arrived surrounded by consequences. I wanted breakfast with her on ordinary mornings. I wanted her photographs on our walls. I wanted to hear her keys in the door at night and know she was home. I wanted Wednesday again. But wanting those things did not give me the right to ask her to build her future around them. I want you to take the job if it's right for you, I said. She nodded once. The disappointment in her face was subtle, but I saw it. Okay, that isn't all I mean. It's enough. She stood. Maya. She picked up her mug and carried it to the sink. Living next to you has been harder than you think, she said without turning around. Not because you've been a bad roommate, because you've been almost everything else. Then she left the kitchen. I remained at the table, staring at the 2 mugs. For the first time, I understood the title of her photograph. Almost Home was not the same as home. That evening, I went to the gallery. Maya was alone, checking labels against a printed list. She looked tired but composed. We need to talk, I said. She kept reading. That usually means someone is about to say something they should have said earlier. That's fair. She set down the list.
I'm listening.
I moved closer, stopping on the other side of the work table. Wednesday mattered to me. I heard you this morning. No, You heard me make a professional recommendation because I was afraid to make a personal one. Her expression shifted slightly. I don't want Portland to become evidence that you need to stay, I continued. And I don't want you to think I'm asking you to choose between your work and me. I haven't been asked to choose you. The sentence hit exactly where she intended. You're right. Maya crossed her arms. I asked you on one real date because I was tired of pretending that what we have feels ordinary to me. I said nothing. She laughed once, but there was no humor in it. There. Now you know. I'm not asking you to make this easy for me. I'm not. I care about you. I know. More than I've said. That is the problem. I looked toward almost home. The gallery lights were off except for one work lamp, leaving the image half in shadow. What do you want me to say? I asked. The truth. I'm trying to protect your choice. And I'm trying to tell you that silence is also a choice. She walked to a stack of shipping boxes near the wall. Each one had been labeled with her name and a Portland address. My stomach dropped. You already accepted? Conditionally. I have until Sunday to sign. And the boxes? I was going to move out even if I didn't take the project. Why? Because I can't keep living in a place where I feel married at breakfast and invisible by dinner. I took a step toward her. You are not invisible to me. Then stop treating me like something you're afraid to touch because it might break. I don't think you'll break. You think everything will. The truth of it silenced me. Maya's voice softened. I'm not asking you to promise forever. I'm asking whether Wednesday was the beginning of something or the kindest way you could think of to say no. It wasn't a no. Then what was it? I opened my mouth. No answer came quickly enough. Maya nodded and the small motion felt final. Don't ask me to stay unless you can tell me what I'm staying for. I'm not asking you to stay. I know. She picked up the printed list. The movers are coming Sunday morning. I'll stay with Lena until I leave for Portland. You scheduled movers? I told you. Silence is a choice. I wanted to stop her. I wanted to say the sentence she had asked for. But if I said it only because boxes were packed, how could either of us trust it? So I left the gallery without asking her to stay. Saturday morning, the lighting system failed. Lena called me at 2:16. Before you panic, she said. Maya is fine. I wasn't panicking. The gallery has lost half its track lights. The opening begins in 4 hours, and Maya is pretending this is manageable. I looked through the glass wall of the conference room. My team was preparing for the most important client presentation of the quarter. Did you call the building manager? Yes. He can send someone Monday. Did a breaker trip?
No.
We checked. Send me a picture of the control panel. She did. I studied the image. The old dimmer system had overheated and shut down 2 lighting circuits. Repairing it properly required an electrician. Creating a safe temporary design required someone who understood the load limits and the gallery layout. I looked at my laptop, then at the presentation room. For years, I had told myself that being dependable meant never allowing personal choices to interfere with professional responsibilities. But I had spent the entire night thinking about what Maya had said. You do things that matter and then act as if they don't. My colleague Daniel walked into the room carrying a stack of renderings. You look terrible, he said. The gallery lighting failed. Maya's gallery? Yes. Go. We present in 40 minutes. I helped write the presentation. The hotel concept is mine. The hotel concept belongs to the firm. I hesitated. Daniel set the renderings on the table. You covered my presentation when my daughter broke her arm. That was different. Because it wasn't Maya? I looked at him. He shrugged. You're not abandoning the project. You're delegating to someone qualified. There's a difference. I went to our department head, explained the situation, and asked Daniel to lead the presentation. I accepted that I might lose the opportunity to present directly to the client. Then I drove to Pioneer Square. Maya stood beneath the darkened track lights with her hands on her hips. When she saw me, her expression tightened. You have a presentation. Daniel is handling it. You shouldn't be here. Lena called. I told her not to. She made a better decision. Maya lowered her voice. You don't have to risk your work to prove something to me. I'm not risking my career. I handed the presentation to a colleague who knows the project. You still gave up the room. Yes. Why? Because the gallery needs me more than the hotel does today. Her eyes held mine. That sounds dangerously close to saying what you want. I'm learning. I inspected the panel, disconnected the failed dimmers, and redistributed the working lights. The arrangement was imperfect, but I realized we could use the darker sections intentionally. Instead of illuminating every image equally, we created pools of light that guided guests through the room. Maya adjusted the sequence. Lower the second track, she said. That will make the brick wall darker. I know. The image will feel more isolated. I made the change. She moved to the final photograph. Can we leave almost home with one light? Yes. Warmer than the others? Yes. For the next 3 hours, we worked without discussing Portland, the movers, or Friday night. At one point, I stood on the ladder while Maya held the base. You trust me? I asked. With the lighting? With the ladder. Don't ruin the moment. When the last track came on, light moved across the room in stages. The city photographs appeared first, bright and sharp. The quieter images emerged gradually. Almost Home waited at the end beneath a single warm beam. Maya stood beside me. It's better, she said. Than your original plan? Different. I'll accept that. She looked at me. You really left the presentation. Yes. You may regret it. I may. Then why do it? Because I love you. The words reached the edge of speech. But the gallery doors opened, and the caterers arrived with Lena behind them. The moment passed. This time I knew it was not because circumstances had stolen it. I had let it pass. The opening was crowded. More people came than Maya expected. Guests moved slowly through the gallery, exactly as she had designed. They stood longest in front of the quietest photographs. I stayed near the back. This was her night. I refused to turn my help into a reason to stand beside her while she received praise. Olivia Grant arrived from Portland just after 7. She was professional, direct, and clearly impressed. I knew your work translated well online, she told Maya. But the sequencing is stronger in person. Thank you. We're lucky to have you. Maya glanced at me before answering. I'm looking forward to it. The words confirmed what I already knew. She had chosen Portland. I felt proud of her. I also felt the future closing. Lena appeared beside me carrying 2 glasses of sparkling water. You look like a man attending his own replacement, she said. That's specific. She isn't replacing you. I know. Do you? I took the glass. Did she tell you to say that? Maya would kill me if she thought I was discussing her personal life. So you're discussing it independently. I'm an entrepreneur. Near the center of the room, Maya laughed at something Olivia said. She looked confident, capable, entirely herself. I realized that loving her could not mean wanting to reduce that version of her to something that fit conveniently into my apartment. When the last guests left, Lena gathered the catering boxes and hugged Maya. You did it, she said. We did.
No.
You did. Some of us only prevented structural collapse. She nodded toward me. I'll load the car. Olivia said goodnight and reminded Maya that the final contract would arrive in the morning. Soon, the gallery was empty. Maya moved through the room collecting abandoned programs. I picked up 2 empty glasses and carried them to the work table. You were incredible tonight, I said. Thank you. I mean it. I know. She reached into her purse and removed her apartment key. She placed it on the empty pedestal beside me. The small metal sound echoed in the quiet room. The movers arrive at 8, she said. Tomorrow morning. Yes. You're leaving that quickly? I packed most of my things this afternoon. Where will you sleep? At Lena's. For 2 weeks. I'll visit my parents for a few days, then drive to Portland. I looked at the key. You could keep it until you leave. I think it's better if I don't. The life we had built had ended in the quietest possible way. No fight. No slammed door. just a key placed on a white pedestal. Maya picked up another program. I need to finish clearing the room. I caught her wrist gently. She looked at my hand, then at me. Wait. For what? I released her. For me to say this correctly. Her expression remained guarded. I walked to almost home. The 2 coffee mugs waited in the photograph, still caught in a sunrise that had happened months ago. I kept telling myself that I was protecting you, I said. That if I didn't ask you to stay, you would be free to choose Portland without guilt. Maya stood several feet away. That's what you said. It was partly true. And the other part? I was protecting myself. Her shoulders lowered slightly. I continued before fear could rearrange the words. When my engagement ended, I decided that depending on someone was the mistake. I thought if I kept my life balanced, my work, my apartment, my plans, nothing could take the whole structure down again. Maya said nothing. Then you moved in, and without asking permission, you became part of every part of my life I considered stable. That sounds like a complaint. It's a confession. She looked away. I stepped closer, leaving enough space that she could choose whether to close it. I knew which coffee you liked after 2 weeks. I knew when you were worried because you played the same 3 songs. I knew you were awake late because light came under your door. I knew all of that, and I kept calling it roommate knowledge because the other explanation terrified me. What explanation? I met her eyes. That I fell in love with you. Maya's face changed, but she did not move. I forced myself to keep going. Taking responsibility was never about what I accidentally saw. It's about owning what I've been too afraid to say. I love you, Maya. The gallery was completely silent. She looked at me for several seconds. Then she asked, would you still be saying this if I weren't leaving tomorrow? Yes. How do you know? Because I loved you before I knew about Portland. I was just too careful to give the feeling a name. And if I take the job, I want you to take it. Her expression hardened. That's not an answer. It is, but it isn't the whole answer. I reached into my jacket pocket and removed the folded page I had been carrying since that afternoon. Maya looked at it. What is that? A plan. Of course it is. I almost smiled. Seattle to Portland is 3 hours by train. Less by plane, more by car if traffic hates us. I can work remotely 2 Fridays each month. You'll have travel weeks, so we alternate visits based on your schedule. We check in after 3 months, not to decide whether your career is inconvenient, but to decide whether the relationship is working for both of us. She stared at the page. You made a schedule? A draft. You really are an architect. I'm not asking you to promise where you'll live in 6 months. I'm asking you to let me love you while you find out. Maya's eyes filled, though her voice remained steady. Are you offering me a relationship or trying to preserve part of the apartment? A relationship. What happens when this becomes difficult? We say it's difficult. And when you get scared? I say I'm scared instead of giving you practical advice you didn't ask for. What if Portland becomes permanent? Then we discuss Portland. What if Seattle still matters to my work? Then we discuss Seattle. What do you want, Ethan? The question was the same one she had asked at the kitchen table. This time I answered it. I want to be the person you call when something good happens, not just when a clothing rack collapses. I want more real dates. I want difficult conversations before they become moving boxes. I want to know what your life looks like when neither of us is pretending this is temporary. Her breath caught. And I want you, I said, not because you live across the hall, not because losing you is frightening. I want you in Portland, Seattle, or wherever your work takes you. I'm asking whether you want me to. She looked down at the folded schedule in my hand. Then she laughed through the tears in her eyes. You included train times. I panicked productively. That may be the most romantic thing you've ever said. It is a low bar. She stepped closer. I'm taking the job. I know. I'm moving out tomorrow. I know. I'm not staying because you finally said the right thing. I'm not asking you to. I need you to understand that.
Ido.
She took the page from my hand and unfolded it. At the bottom, I had written one final line. This is a proposal for 6 months of honesty. Everything after that is a mutual decision. Maya read it twice. Then she looked at me. I want this. The schedule? Don't ruin it. The relationship? Yes. Relief hit so hard I had to breathe before speaking. Yes. Yes, Ethan. Her hand rested against my chest. But if you ever tell me what I should do instead of telling me how you feel, I reserve the right to photograph your worst angle and display it publicly. That seems fair. And I choose the first weekend. Also fair. And I'm not returning the key. I looked toward the pedestal. No. I'm leaving it there tonight. Why? Because we're not continuing the old arrangement. I understood. The key belonged to the life where neither of us had said what we wanted. Maya rose onto her toes and kissed me. It was not hurried or dramatic. It was quiet, certain, and earned by every word we should have said earlier. When we separated, she rested her forehead against mine. You took your time, she whispered. I was trying to be responsible. You were doing it wrong. I know. Sunday morning I helped Maya move. Not because I wanted to make it harder for her to leave. Not because I believed lifting boxes entitled me to a place in her future. I helped because she asked me. Lena arrived at 8 with coffee and the expression of someone who had already guessed everything. She looked at Maya, then at me. Did the adults communicate? Eventually, Maya said. Should I be proud or exhausted? Both, I answered. Maya handed me a small wrapped package before the movers closed the truck. Inside was a print of Almost Home. On the back, she had written, the place was real. We were the part that was almost. Below that, she added, let's fix that. We did not pretend the next 6 months were easy. The first train I booked was delayed by 4 hours. Maya spent 2 weeks photographing businesses along the coast with almost no reliable service. I missed one planned weekend because the hotel project entered emergency revisions. She missed another because a storm changed her travel schedule. But we spoke. When I felt unimportant, I told her instead of becoming distant. When she worried that the relationship would eventually become another demand on her time, she said it before resentment had a chance to grow. We learned that love across distance could not survive on grand speeches alone. It needed calendars, honest disappointment, repaired plans, and the willingness to ask direct questions. 3 months in, we sat in a Portland cafe and reviewed the schedule I had made. Maya crossed out half the rules. You made this too complicated, she said. You agreed to it. I was emotional. You complimented the train times. I was temporarily unwell. She replaced the list with 3 lines. Tell the truth. Show up when you say you will. Say when the plan needs to change. That's vague, I said. It's human. 6 months after the exhibition, Maya completed the project. Olivia offered her another contract that allowed her to split her work between Seattle and Portland. Maya accepted because it was what she wanted, not because I asked her to come back. We did not return to the Queen and apartment. That life had served its purpose. Instead, we rented a small house with 2 workspaces, a kitchen large enough for 2 coffee mugs, and a converted garage where Maya could build a studio. On the day we moved in, I carried the last box down the hallway and stopped outside the bedroom. The door was closed. I knocked. From inside, Maya laughed. You live here. I've learned from experience. She opened the door. A small wooden sign hung at eye level. Knock first. Tell the truth second. I read it twice. Who made this? Lena. She knows too much about our life. She knows exactly enough. Maya stepped closer and placed her arms around my neck. So, she said, what truth are you telling today? I looked past her at the room, then toward the open hallway, the studio, and the boxes waiting to be unpacked. 6 months earlier, I had believed responsibility meant avoiding the possibility of hurting someone. I had been wrong. Sometimes responsibility meant speaking before silence made the decision for you. Sometimes it meant loving someone without asking them to become smaller. Sometimes it meant building a future with doors instead of walls. I'm home, I said. Maya smiled. So am I. Then she pulled me inside and closed the door. Some people believe love proves itself when one person gives up everything to stay. I think mature love asks a harder question. Can two people keep choosing each other while still becoming who they were meant to be? Share your answer in the comments.